morning, everybody. Hello, and welcome to
Good
Shifting Views
morning.
Concepts. We are SRC. Good morning. My name is Mark Thomas. I'll be moderating today. Along with our SRC panel, we will continue with our series, Revelation Revealed. Now, our panel, as always, is Anala D., Archie Sanders, and Dr. Kadar Griffo. If you've attended our broadcast or watched our YouTube videos, you know the in-depth perspective they all bring to our conversations on the Bible. If you are new to the show, please go to our newsletter for an in-depth bio of all our excellent contributors. So speaking of contributors, we have a special guest today that we've invited on. Tamisha, that's Anala's daughter, is a guest speaker. Her resume includes being founder of telehealth company to assist those working with special needs people. She is also the creator of Fireside Chats for Global Women, because turning pain into power is sexy, a brand built on the concept that anxiety and depression for most women is suppressed feminine power, screaming to be unleashed. Tamisha is an avid seeker after all things spiritual, whether it be from the Bible or other more esoteric sources. She has a keen wisdom in this regard. Today, she's going to kick off the show. Yes, you do. You're going to kick off the show with some insight and inspiration on the book of Revelation and how it relates to death and the rebirth of the Christ consciousness. So, Tamisha, I expect the unexpected. So please.
With me, you probably want to expect the unexpected, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Mom and I were conversing yesterday, and I hope that this can be conversational more than it is me just talking, right? Anybody that's here, please feel free to comment and jump in on this. But Mom, you and I, thanks for having me on SRC today. This is amazing. But you and I were talking yesterday, and we were feeling some heavy emotions. We just lost a very close family member yesterday morning, and we wanted to just kind of get together and kind of support each other through what our family is going through right now. And my mom says, I'm feeling this energy. It's just so much, death, and not just these physical deaths, but these metaphorical deaths that are happening. And we brought up the time that we both noticed that trees have been falling all over the place. And if anybody else here has noticed that, if you go hike, you've noticed that as well. If you go hiking as often as we do, you notice that trees are falling all over the place. And so at the beginning of this thing we're calling pandemic, some are calling it a scamdemic, some are calling it a scaredemic. But at the beginning of this thing, I said, this is why they're trying to keep everyone in the house. They're cutting down all the trees, right? But what it really was a reflection of these deaths that are happening. And again, not just these physical deaths. And so we're talking about that. And I said, Mom, I read something really interesting that I believe relates to the story of when Christ, or as we know it as Christ, or the Christ consciousness, went down into Hades or hell and, died, so to speak, and then was reborn. And I said, this feels a lot like that. And I say that because I came across this article about the planet Venus and how Venus has descended down into what they call the Earth chakra, which is synonymous with it descending down into the dark, shadowy places, and then being reborn. And I said, all right, so if this is a lot like the Christ consciousness, Venus is representative of that which is feminine. So could this be the feminine Christ consciousness, now that we know this new age that is not coming into view, but that is here, that this new age is led by this idea of the feminine principle or the feminine conscious? Could this be the feminine conscious going down into what we call the shadowy, dark, hellish, deathly realms in order to be reborn. And I said, if this is it, then let's get excited about what's to come. I said, if this is our idea of hell, again, hell being the dark, shadowy things that are burning away, things that are dying, let's get excited about this ideal of hell, right? But this time, this is the idea in which the Christ consciousness is relative to us going down into the shadowy, dark place to recover all that has been lost. It's the death of the old ways of being. It's the death of old ways of thinking. It's the death of old ideas, even deaths to who we thought we were, right? Deaths of the mask we've worn our entire lives in order to have this amazing, glorious rebirth. So if this is our idea of things burning all around us, if this is our idea of transitioning from dark into light, then let this be an exciting journey through hell. And so Mom said, can you come on and just kind of talk about that? And yeah, so this is my idea of death and rebirth. Most of our lives, those of us who have grown up in church, we were taught to avoid this idea of hell. But my question is, what if we've already been here, right? What if we've already journeyed through hell? I know, speaking for me, I feel like I have. I feel like I've been here multiple times. There has been multiple deaths in my life. Some of us find it really difficult to say, could this possibly be indicative of what I call hell? It's difficult to say or watch the burning away or the dying away of not just loved ones, but the burning away of almost everything we thought was life. It's difficult to see the burning away of old relationships, of friendships, of jobs you once held for 10 or 15 years. This is synonymous with going through that burning, right? Allowing the old to burn away so that whatever is reborn, it's something that we create ourselves. So I say that allow this idea of the Christ consciousness to, journey down into these shadowy realms in order to get back. I think the story in the Bible says that Christ died and went into hell to get back the keys and set people free. Well, we are the people. We are that consciousness. So this is us going down into these shadowy realms and grabbing the keys back to our lives, to the lives we were always born to live, right? Grabbing the keys back and unleashing our power, grabbing the keys back and releasing our inheritances and our gifts, our talent, our dreams, our whatever that is that has been locked away, right? Grabbing the keys back and setting ourselves free. So if we are going through this idea of hell, let's get excited about the idea of rebirth.
Okay, any comments from that? That was excellent, Tamisha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely excellent. This plays right into where we're going to be going today with Dr. Griffo's information that he, in chapter 4 of Revelation. Another thing, because we talked about a little bit of this last week about dying to the old ways, old self, and things like that. We also talked about the fact that so many people, there are just so many people that we see are also transcending the physical death. And so we talked about that a little bit. And one of the things that Tamisha said was that because of this new, and I hope, hopefully Dr. Griffo will get into this, or everybody get into this conversation, but because there is a change that some of the physical bodies can't deal with the change. And therefore, you'll see the transition of those who are not prepared or not equipped to move into this new earth is what we're seeing. And then as we look at Revelation, in fact, Mark Thomas and I was having a conversation that you seeing that it started from the bottom, like and even Dr. Griffo and Pastor Archie said the same thing. It started from the bottom and it's moving to the top. We started from the bottom of the chakras and now we're getting higher. But some people are not equipped to go there, and therefore you see a lot of physical death. And that's one of the things that we talked about yesterday. So I'd like for you guys to to chime in on that too. Tamisha, if you would kind of add to that and let's
Yeah.
on that.
I love that you said, you know, starting from the bottom. I'm hearing starting from the bottom. Now we're here, right? So, but this bottom is the dark, shadowy realm, right? The bottom or underneath or down below is what we consider hell to be. But, you know, as I mentioned before, you know, how would we know what top is unless we knew its equal and as powerful opposite, which would be bottom? How would we know what light is unless we knew its equal and as powerful opposite, which is dark, right? How can we get to the idea of heaven without first having journeyed through hell, right? And so, you know, with I'm gonna say it's a sensitive topic to say, you know, this is why people, we have our, you know, our intuition that kind of tells us, oh, okay, we understand why this is happening. Like this makes sense. But it's a scary thing to journey through hell, isn't it? Like that's not for the faint of heart. And so we see people fainting, like literally we see people fainting, whether that's synonymous with death or just giving up. But yeah, it is this descent down, you know, but people are more focused on the deathly parts, right? So yes, it's this descend into the dark, shadowy, scary, deathly stuff. But what we're forgetting is that its equal and as powerful opposite must exist, which is rebirth, right? So we're forgetting about the rebirth. We're forgetting that that comes after this. Whatever rebirth looks like to you. For me, you know, journeying through the dark, shadowy realms, for me, you know, what I teach on my platform is with mental health is journeying through the darkness of mental health to unleash a power we've kept hidden for far too long, or that we were taught to keep hidden. So for me, and a lot of people, it is required to go through these depths. It's required to go and get the keys back. It's required to descend down into the dark, shadowy realm in order to be elevated or ascend back into whatever it is that you create for yourself. So as you're journeying through this dark, scary stuff, the work is to not, you know, just focus on the darkness, but know that the light also exists. And also, your rebirth is dependent upon the seeds you plant in the darkness, because the darkness is synonymous with the womb. We think about it, right? Like where does the male plant a seed? Where do we plant seeds as farmers or gardeners, right? In the darkness, in the dirt. So realizing that what comes out on this rebirth is whatever seeds we planted in this hell, in this darkness. So that's the exciting part, you know, is realizing that reality exists. Yeah.
I want to add something before you move on. You know, and it's so funny because, you know, even the Bible says what you do in the dark. The Bible said what you do, but I hear what you plant in the dark is going to grow. So that just makes so much sense what you just said.
Yes, I like that. Yes,
well, we discovered a while ago that darkness is already there before light ever start. Darkness is where light and spirit is conceived.
Yeah.
Darkness, you know, we're saying what's done in the dark comes to the light. In order to be born again, there must be death.
Yeah.
In order for a seed to grow, it has to perish first. And you know, I wanted to do the bonsai plant one time, and I went to the store and I said I must do this myself. I'm not going to get one that's already been grown. And I didn't understand. At first, I didn't understand how the plants are grown. I had to put it in the refrigerator. First of all, I had to put that seed in the refrigerator for it can germinate. Then it stays in there for a couple of weeks. Then you got to take it out. So in darkness, that is where things are just lying there dormant. It's just like as we talk about death and talk about going through hell. I think, and Professor Griff can correct me if I'm wrong. 7 times and the Hindus, they believe that, you know, after 7 times you go through this 7 times, on the 7th time when you actually achieve the higher consciousness, then that's it. That's when you're there to where you supposed to be at. If I'm paraphrasing it, but I'm sure some technical terms for this here. But you know, I'm a country boy, so I try to get it to where we can see it, you know, the way I can see it. But you understand what I'm saying? According to what the Hindus believe, you know, the 7, I guess the 7 times, you know, and the space between those 7 times is not like we're thinking, you know what I'm saying? Well, you were saying, well, maybe it's 3 years, you know, in each time. No, it doesn't mean that, but after the 7th time that you actually are reincarnated, that might be the word. You know, then you'll finally hit that higher consciousness after you've gone through all this here. And because lying in the dark is the thing that we're trying to achieve. I always think about what Anala was telling me, that it's already there. So if something is already there, it's laying where we can't see it, it's dormant, and we have to bring it forth, right? So the darkness is what we're looking for is there in the darkness, may be in hell, where you know, and you got to dig it up. You got to dig it up through all these things. You know, one year we went through nothing but death after death after death after death. But in our actuality, the death is to live, and to live is to die. You know, once the soul is encapsulated inside this flesh, it can't do but so much. But then when you die, it releases, because see, a soul can't die, a spirit can't die. But that darkness, you know, that hellish thing that you go through, you see how you feel after you go through hell and come out of it, you know. Whew, boy, I'm glad I'm done with that. I'm glad I came through that. But in the end, something comes alive.
That's right. And that brings us back to what Tamisha was saying, and also what Dr. Griffo was saying. And I think, you know, this is, guys, in line with Revelation. If you are moving through the chapters of Revelation, I think, where was Dr. Griff at the last we stopped, Thomas?
Where was he?
Yes.
He was on, that would be chapter 4 and verse 7 or 8, I believe.
So it's right there. We're right there talking about the same types of things.
Yeah. And so Revelation comes off as a very scary book to dissect, right? And you guys are made up of a group of panelists that can delve into this, right? But Revelation is seen as like what, fire and brimstone, I think people say. It's just like, and so I love it. I love it now that I am in this, come into this new knowledge about what all this means. I'm excited about the idea of death now that I know how to die.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I'm excited about fire and hell and brimstone, because that means I get to burn away all that never served my highest good, right? I'm excited about these types of deaths. I'm excited that, to get rid of certain ideas and certain ways of being and thinking that were built on false premises of who I thought I was. Right? I'm excited to die to the me that never really was me. I'm excited that fire can do 2 things, that the fire of hell can do 2 things. So when you think about going through hell, let's think about it like this, right? Fire can do 2 things. It can consume and it can refine, right? So allow this fire of hell to consume, to burn away all that is not you, so that it can refine all that is you. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's good.
Wow,
Point.
that makes
Hell
sense.
is exciting. Hell is an exciting place.
It just makes you
once you know how to journey through it.
It makes you understand too, also when the Bible teaches us to count it all joy. See, we, you know, at the time we didn't understand what those things meant, because that's why I say that I believe Revelation should have been the first book, because of the fact that, you know, Revelation teaches you about your body and why you're going through this and why you are ascending. You first descend and then you start to ascend. There is just no way around that. That is going to happen. You are going to descend and then you ascend. And that's what we get into. And so anyway, let me pass it back over to the moderator here.
No, that's a great conversation. I mean, the only thing I was going to say is in regard to that is that that's our nature, you know, and we return to that, and it can occur over millennia, you know. I mean, we think of time in years, but this happens, as the doctor has told us, over ages, that we go through ages of the zodiac, etc., and that we actually experience that, but we have to keep returning to the dark place, right? Something like that. All right.
Yeah, it's this yin and yang, you know. Nothing we can do about it. Yeah.
Okay, it's good to see we got an audience here today. Please ask questions or make comments. Raise your hand. We'll be glad to get to those. But for now, we're going to dive back into the book of Revelation, where last week we finished the 3rd chapter, where after having visited 6 cities and their angels, we arrived at Laodicea, where Pastor Archie and the panel discussed what the term lukewarm meant in verse 16 and why we must be zealous and activate our higher consciousness. In other words, don't be lukewarm. And then finally in verse 20 and 21, we were shown that if we overcome and open the door, we may then sit upon the throne fully aware of all 7 wheels of consciousness, or the chakra. And then in the final section of last week's show, I'm just kind of summarizing last week, we started our discussion of chapter 4 with Dr. Griffo, unwrapping the first 7 verses of that chapter. If you missed any of that, we really encourage you to go back and watch those videos on YouTube, because it's just, you're just laying the foundation for everything that's to come when you understand what happened in all these episodes. So, Dr. Griffo, in chapter 4, we leave the teaching narrative of chapters 2 and 3 and read the first person account of a speaker who is portrayed as John in the Bible, but who we know is Apollonius. Last week, we discussed all the symbology in verses 1 through 7, where the story is of a ceremony or a vision with the speaker who is in spirit relating what he witnesses. All of it is symbolic in nature. We can't sum it up all here, but in verses 6 and 7, you explained how the 4 beasts represent the 4 fixed points of the zodiac, which surrounded Jupiter, or the throne of Zeus. Really interesting stuff. I know there's much more to this, Doctor, so if you would, could you pick up from there and let's just keep on with chapter 4.
Okay, there we go. Trying to unmute. First off, condolences to you guys on the loss of your family member or close friend or whomever it was that you guys lost.
Thank you.
As we go into chapters 5 and 6, we really will get into a lot of what you guys were talking about as far as death and rebirth, and the darkness, etc. But as verse 8 says, each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under its wings, day and night. They never stopped saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." So what you're dealing with in this verse is actually just numerology, with the 4 and the 6, which is 24. As we said last week, you have 12 cranial nerves that are in pairs. So the pairs of 12 is, of course, 24. So then that's what this is speaking about in the context of the 4 beasts and the 6 with 6 wings. As we've also previously stated, around behind your sinus cavity is called an upper wing and a lower wing. So it's when you see the imagery of angels with double wings, is speaking of this particular bone that's behind your head that holds the pituitary gland within it. And it has the throne that's in the middle, a depression in it that's called the throne. And this is where, of course, we get the whole, what is the Ark of the Covenant, where it says that there was a cherub and it had all of these great things from God as far as an electrical charge and etc. So this is dealing with this particular area of the brain that's behind your nose. So this is where you're getting your wings at. And of course, it's attached to the whole 24 pairs or the 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Verse 9, whenever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to him and sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They lay down their crowns before the throne and say, so again, as Queen Anala was speaking about it, as well as the goddess Tamisha, is speaking about raising from the lower level up to the higher level. And once you get to the higher level, by burning through that process of alchemy and burning that desire away, and you rise up, then you're going to be dealing with being in a higher state of consciousness where you will worship, quote unquote, God, or you will become one with God. So again, the worshiping is simply manifesting at a higher level of consciousness, and you will sup with God. And the final verse in chapter 4 is verse 11. You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being. If you go to and study embryology, when a sperm and an egg meet and then they start to divide, and then it morphs back into one. One of the first things that's created is the heart and then the brain, or the brain and the heart. And from that, it animates the rest of the body. So this is where you're dealing with right here, where all things were created, because once that the brain starts to work, then it starts to animate the rest of the body. So, and of course, God is where the brain dwells. Real simple. It's not complicated, even though the religious world has made it complicated.
Go ahead, Anala.
Yes, you said that we move into the highest consciousness when we allow the desire to burn away. So what is that desire that we are allowing to burn away?
Well, we have in our lower chakras, the lower 3 chakras, is where all of your carnal desires lay, whether it's in the your desire to eat, your desire to mate, or copulate, whatever. All of your root desires of the things that you want are encased in this lower 3 chakras. So once you're able to conquer those by fasting, by prayer, meditation, going within, then you start to rule your body from your mental state as opposed to your physical carnal state. And at that point, then you're able to rise up and then start to rule over yourself with the lamb ruling, because as we recall last week, Aries rules the top of the head. This is where the thoughts are. So you're more mental now than you are physical. And this is why the lamb wins.
Tamisha, let me ask you something. With some of the clients that you work with the clients that you work with, how to, when they are going through the darkness and all the anxiety, how is there something you do, or do you use this method of letting them, I guess, assuming you let them start working with them in the darkness, and how do you get them up to the light? So kind of explain how that kind of works when people are going through this.
Yeah. So based on my experience, I'm only able to teach from my experience of going through the dark myself. And so the burning away is what keeps these powers locked away, right? Again, we're reading from a text that's been interpreted over centuries a lot by men, right? So my work is tailored and targeted for women. And so when you teach to lock away your desires. You are teaching simultaneously women and even the feminine part of men to lock away the part of creation. So there needs to be some interpretation about an emotional intelligence about what these lower realms are. What these lower realms are. So it isn't about locking away or burning away desires, but it is about managing them and putting them in their place. Okay. So when we talk about journeying through this dark realm, it's developing emotional intelligence. Okay. And then knowing what to do with your emotions, with your desires. So it's not a sin to have desires, right? But you can do yourself a disservice when you don't know what to do with your desires. It's not a sin to be powerful, but you can do yourself a disservice when you don't know what to do with your power, okay? So what I teach the women and girls that I get a chance to work with, or what I share, is gaining emotional intelligence and knowing what to do with your power once you do unleash them. So the burning away is merely burning away all of these things that have kept your power trapped. And so a lot of the issues that I've come across with women in my work is, well, now that they've unleashed this power, they don't know what to do with it. So you have people who are confused about their, what we call carnal desires. They think it means to go and pour it out when you're in a relationship, or Jim calling up Jim, James, Paul, and Tyrone and pouring it out on him. And that's, you know, once you gain emotional intelligence, you know that it's not about killing away your desires, but it's about, with emotional intelligence, knowing what to do with them and putting them in their place.
That makes sense when you think about the young people, children. And even, I mean, this is boys and girls. You think about, they have these desires when they are young, and no one is telling them how to manage those desires. In fact, what we do tell them is that don't feel that. Don't do this. Don't. And so therefore they go out and they just let and I think Pastor Archie, you talked about that with being young, let the animal instincts just run away with them because no one has taught them how to manage those desires. And as a matter of fact, we told them to burn them away. In fact, we took them in church. At least that's what happened to me. They took me in church and put me in the front line, and they poured oil on top of me.
Yeah.
Everything, and nothing worked.
It's actually really disheartening when you think about it, because you have, humans growing up basically telling them to lock themselves away, to enslave themselves, to enslave and vilify part of creation, right? And instead of, I guess you don't know what you don't know, right? So this is information that's traveled through the centuries, and we've just taught it to children, and they grew up and had children of their own, and they taught it to their children, and so on and so forth. So you just didn't know what you didn't know, but now that we know, what are you going to do about it, right? Now that you have this knowledge, what decisions are you going to make from this place of power?
Yes, Tamisha. Listen, we one thing we really have to keep in mind here now is Apollonius. He is opening something up to us that concerned a person that was in the position to be initiated into the mysteries of the masters. He was a master of this mystery here himself, and we're speaking of the creation, the four principles of creation. At this point, the person that's being initiated had to be in position to understand all the levels of creation, and that's why I talk about the many eyes, because it sees everywhere. It sees everywhere, the exterior, the interior. At this point, that person that was being initiated, if it was me, it reminded me of the shellback and the golden shellback out on the ship when I crossed the equator. When you cross the equator at 00 longitude and 00 latitude, you become a golden shellback. And in order to get that card that goes in your record, you got to go through all this stuff concerning, polywog and, all this stuff. But what I want to make us to understand, it talks about when it says that the encircling the throne were 24 thrones. It began to talk about all these eyes. Understand, Apollonius was trying to get us to see that in symbolism, that this level of creation, it sees everywhere. You're supposed to be on a level where you are able to, like we are saying about the animalistic ways, we are in order for you to go higher into the higher consciousness, you got to be able to control all that. You got to be able to see it coming. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been there and done that. I ought to know better because I can see it. I'm a seer. I'm moving into seership, and it's just like you telling people that, okay, this is what I've experienced certain things, but I see this in your life. A sage, prophet, seer. This was an initiation, y'all, that this person had to be able to control all these things when he was at this point in order to move on.
That's right. That's right. And and to think about this is where teaching comes in, because you got to remember, these people actually went somewhere and someone taught them this information, and that's what SRT is doing, is teaching this, because you don't know what you don't know, as Tamisha just mentioned. You don't know what you don't know, and we didn't know this stuff, but now, because there is the consciousness, as Dr. Griffo said, I think last week, has been poured out upon everyone. You're in a position now to get this information and not be in the dark anymore. And that Pastor Archie is talking about, he says, it's eyes, that it is us, guys, that it is us looking deep within ourselves, going into that darkness, as it's been mentioned here, and then coming into the light, and managing the dark along with the light. And I now understand, Tamisha, why you say I'm both. I'm dark and I'm light, because you got to manage the darkness along with the light. You can't extinguish it.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be doing yourself a disservice. It's like, remember when I was on the United Consciousness conclave, and people are like, oh, I never thought about it that way, but it's synonymous with trying to erase. I always like to say it's trying to erase the moon from the night sky. Like, you accept the sun, but you don't accept the moon, right? You accept day, but you don't accept night. It's the same way in which, humans have been vilified. It's like you accept the lighter skin, but you don't accept the darker skin. You accept the multicolored cat, but you don't accept the black cat, right? It's all of this stuff about the darkness that is so scary to people. I remember reading something in one of Dr. Griffo's books about how the word monster came about. And I don't know if you have time to explain that now, but it'd be great if you could, about monster, because, considerably monsters come out at night. But the backstory to that was our ancient ones, how they named the sun, how they named the moon and the star, and then conjoined the words together, or something like that. Could you explain that? Just relating.
I would love to hear that, Dr. Griffo, and tell us which books which book you are citing that from.
It might have been, was it a book or was it a lecture? I could be wrong. It's one of the two, but.
I think it was. I'm not sure if it was a lecture or in a book, but of course, back in the day, there was no street lights, there was no electricity. So then all they had was the sun and the moon and the stars. And, they followed it, looked at it, studied it, recorded it, etc. And during the daylight hours, of course, the sun brought the warmth. The sun gave them the ability to see. The sun brought the nourishment. It helped with the crops, etc. So it became good, great, God in essence. And then on the flip side, when the sun would descend into the west or go into the underworld, and then the moon would come out, and now you don't have as much sunlight, so now the cold is here. At a certain point, the predators would come out, and you can't see the predators. So night became associated with evil, scary things, etc. So when the moon came out and the stars came out, and you combine the two words, moon, star, became monster, because mon is short for moon, and star, if you look at a lot of the words in the English language with the ending S-T-E-R, is really the word star. So monster came from the fact that these predators would come at night and possibly grab your kids, bite you, etc. And that's how we came up with the so-called concept of monsters coming out at night. But it was all a play on the fact that we couldn't see these animals, these predators at certain times at night, as well as, you know, the coldness, the dampness, etc. that would come once the sun went to the west.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing revelation?
It's
That's
very
revelation.
amazing. It makes you understand how people, why they see dark as bad, you know, now, you know, and why we was told those monster type stories when we were growing up, because they always told the stories at dark and at night. I never understood, why would you do this when a child is getting ready to go to sleep? It just made it more real for them because of the darkness.
I just want to comment on one thing. I really appreciate what Archie brought up as regards chapter 4 here, where he was where he threw out there that this is actually a person being taught that these things are being revealed, and that this is an initiate seeing or being shown his own true nature in effect. So I really appreciate that. I kind of put it in a nutshell for me. Doctor, you want to go ahead and move on to chapter 5 there? We've got about 10 minutes left. We can cover the first 2 or 3 verses here and see where that takes us.
Starting with verse 1 in chapter 5. And then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. So what we're looking at here is a book or a scroll, and it's sealed with 7 seals. Later on, I think it mentions that it has, you know, it's down the backside. But so what you're looking at right now is the human body. It is the scroll that is sealed with 7 seals that's going down the backside. These are your 7 chakras that's going along your body. And verse 2, and I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? Meaning, who is able to unlock these 7 chakras so then the person can self-actualize, I guess would be a better psychological or psychiatric term. Right? Verse 3, but no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. Meaning nobody had, well, the individual that they're talking about or talking to was not manifesting in the way that they should. They were not doing the inner work, the shadow work, to be able to unlock their inner self and be able to rise up Jacob's ladder, the 33 chakras, the 33 vertebrae, the ladder of Jacob, etc. So they were not able to conquer their lower self. As Tamisha said, you know, it's not about not dealing with those lower chakras. And as she was saying, you know, it's about how you manifest them, how you manage them, how you don't allow them to control you, but they are needed at certain times, because you do need to have a certain physical response in relationship to fright, or if you're getting ready to fight, or you have to eat at certain points. So certain of these things, we have to procreate to keep, you know, people on the planet. So certain things we do need. It's just about not being able to allow them to control you.
Griff, let me ask you a question before you move on. Why was it that no one on earth, that's based on what this text is saying here, why couldn't people control it? Or was that the time period we were in that no one can control it at that time?
Well, the only person that was able to manifest that was, according to the Bible, Jesus himself. And if you recall, he talked about the lawyers and not the lawyers that we think of that try law in today's terminology. The lawyers that he was speaking of was the Levitical priesthood, the ones who interpreted the law, the laws of Moses. So as he said, that they were hindering the people from going within. He said, woe unto you lawyers, you're hindering the people from going within, AKA meditation. So at that point, what they, the priesthood was in charge of the laws, and they interpreted it for everybody else the same way that the preachers do the same thing with the Bible. And so the people did not know how to journey within and make the connection with the throne of God as the Bible speaks about. So then at that point, nobody was understanding this particular type of teachings. And as we've said before, Jesus talked to the disciples and gave them the real information. And then he talked to the masses of people and gave them the surface information. So you had to be one of his secret disciples in order to be able to get, or one of his disciples to be able to get this real unveiling information that would allow you to unlock those seals. So that's why nobody was able to unseal the seals.
Celestial, right? Celestial and terrestrial is what you hear a lot in the church. Oh, the flesh can't receive the things of God, and you realize not you preachers, and I'm a preacher. We just didn't explain it the way, because we weren't quite sure ourselves until I've done a lot of research. I found out myself is speaking of that terrestrial being and that celestial being. One is flesh and the other is spirit. You can't see the things of the spirit in the flesh. You gotta, and then we got to think about occultism, because see, back in the day, you couldn't even talk about being an occultist, because now you're getting ready to get hung and burned and all this stuff. But see, now you got to understand, in order to see those spiritual things, you have to understand that you got to be that solarical man, who is what is spoken of quite a bit in this Bible. It's not just speaking of us as a human, well, as an individual, because there's a difference between a human being and an individual. So we got to understand that celestial and terrestrial, which Paul spoke of before, there's two different bodies.
Okay, I just have a theory, and I think it's a funny one, but a plausible one. Mom, when you said, well, why wasn't there anyone to be able to conquer this? Or I think there were, but I think as humans do, things get out of hand, right? I think things get out of hand, and people start taking advantage of the power they've unleashed, right? So this is where I talk about emotional intelligence. And so again, we have, the church had taken over, pretty much creating something for all humans to live by. It was a way, and we talk about this, a way of control, but I think deeper than that, it became scary when people started really coming fully into this power and not having gained the emotional intelligence to know how to wield it. This is what I talk about. So they developed these societies a way to say, okay, let's just keep everybody not knowing this power, and then let's develop a school of thought and just try to develop people in a way to have some emotional intelligence so that they'll know what to do with this. Because if it's just free reign information, then people run amok, right? We see, not to go into too much detail, but, we see, okay, so just thinking about the kind of patriarchal system that was developed in creating the scriptures, and then you don't see the woman anywhere in power in scripture. And so I think it's kind of funny to think about, Uncle Archie, when you said you have people, have these witch hunts and occults. That's exactly what happened. So it was, fully coming into this power and just not knowing what to do with it. And then things got out of hand, and people were murdered, and it was like, okay, we control this knowledge and not let anybody else know until the world is mature enough to know what to do with this power. So this is where we come in, right? This is why we're here on the planet. This is our job. Now that we've come through this ourselves, we're the ones here to leave that information for those to develop emotional intelligence to know what to do with their power and not have to be, So just a theory.
All right, I got a question for you, Doctor. It says, I mean, are these first 3 verses, is a lot of what they're telling us is that this is difficult, this is not easy?
Yes. If you recall, Jesus had to always admonish the people as well as his disciples on how to be able to get into the kingdom of God. As we will eventually get into verse 5, the people were crying and weeping because they found that no one was able to open the seals. And then he said, fear not, that the Lion of the tribe of Judah will come and be able to unlock this. And what that is talking about, if you go back to the 5 books of Moses, where it talks about the 12 tribes as they're around the encampment, they're in the 4 different directions, and Judah is in the east. So Judah is in the east, the same way that when Jesus was on the boat with Peter and they was fishing, and he said they couldn't catch anything. And then he told Peter to cast your net to the right side. And then all of a sudden, Peter caught 153 fish. You know what I'm saying? Because your pineal gland, your pituitary, your thalamus is basically located, even though it's center mass, it's more so to the right or in the east. And so that's why Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father, because the right hand is the east side. And once you bring that energy, that Christ energy up, and it tilts to the right, then that's when you'll be able to manifest to become that Lion of the tribe of Judah, because Judah was always associated with the righteousness. Out of all of the 12 tribes, he was the one, or his descendancy was the one that was going to bring the Messiah. So it was very difficult, but again, because the people were not being taught how to properly go inside and manifest that energy and bring it up.
Exactly.
Archie wanted to say something.
Oh, Archie.
No,
All right.
I'm just, this is very interesting because when you look at that, it talks about the root of David, which is born in the sky. And so it is where that root comes from, which again, it goes back to talking about God, the solar God, and man as earth himself. But that root is actually the root of David is David reincarnated. That's what it said. David reincarnated. And it's just so much symbolism in here, y'all. I mean, it's I spend my time just reading, trying to catch up with everything, get everything. But that is very interesting there too, because I sit in church for quite a bit. And you listen about David's lineage and his roots, and all the time we were taking this thing literally, and we did not understand the symbolism in it. And I would say it's very, very, very interesting for someone to get a hold of it. Start researching, look at some of this thing, and we'll begin to see who we are. That's what we do.
Uncle Archie, I'm sorry, you said it was the earth root or something. What was that part again?
Yeah, that when it talks about the lion, of course that was talking about Leo, right? That Dr. Griff talking about Leo, which is the zodiac sign. But it talks about God. It's the solar God, and incarnated as man on earth. It's actually the sun, because they actually worship the sun. It was a solar God. But the God that it was us.
Right.
It was
right.
us.
So you said something about the root chakra. Something.
Yeah, and which it has its roots in the sky and its branches on the earth.
Yeah. So earlier I mentioned Venus descending into the earth chakra, and read it to you guys. And the number of likes that was on it before I saw it was 443. When I liked it, it liked it at 444. And I said, okay, this is something I'm supposed to hold on to. So it says, the name of the page is Woman Rising. Okay. This is the profile name, but then they wrote Venus, the rose gate of descent, because Uncle Archie, you mentioned sun, which would represent masculine, Venus would represent feminine. And earlier I mentioned how this feminine principle of the Christ consciousness, because we know Christ consciousness as a masculine, right? Mm-hmm. So in this new age with the rise of feminine and these new ideologies about not just Father God, but Mama God, it's very much in alignment with what you just read of this feminine Christ. So Venus, rose gate of descent into the earth star chakra in the sign of Aquarius, right? On this day of February 10th, this was February 10th, Venus is descending from the root chakra to the earth star chakra. At this time, Venus is invisible to most of our eyes, of course, because she's in the lower dark shadowy realms. We mentioned this unseen spiritual realm, because she's so close to the sun that we cannot see her. So I wish I could have shared that, but that's why I asked you to repeat that, because this isn't like hocus pocus stuff. Like, this is literally as above, so below. Right. This is literally what is happening in our skies, in our universe, is happening not just on Earth, but in our bodies. So we're so focused on as above, so below as it relates to what is seen. There is an as above, so below as it relates to what is unseen too. And this is a journey within.
Tell people how they can follow you, because I'm sure that they want to get more of this information from you. So how do they do that?
Yes. Please do. For those that this language, if you speak this language or you want to speak this language, and this is for you, and you'll know that it's for you. So you can follow me at Tamisha Burgess on IG. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's IN/Tamisha Burgess, and then also subscribe to my digital platform, which is Fireside Chats for Global Women, because turning pain into power is sexy. It's definitely for those women who this is for. And surprisingly enough, we have some new men followers who actually like this idea of some of the things we're going to be talking about, but you guys will see. And then Instagram, it's Fireside Chats for Global Women too. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Well, thanks for coming today, Tamisha. We really appreciate
awesome.
your presence.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks. Thank you. It's good to see you too. And you too, Uncle Archie. And you too, Griff. Thanks.
So we're going to sign off now. I'm going to give an abbreviated sign off. Just to say that questions or comments, please write us at shiftingreligiousconcepts@gmail.com. And we really appreciate everybody's patronage. Please go to YouTube when you find a minute and view us there and give us a thumbs up, because that really does help our cause. So that's it for today's broadcast. We will see you again next week, say on Sunday at 10 o'clock. I don't even know what the date of that is, but we got calendars. Anyway,
happy Valentine's, everybody.
We wish everybody peace, health, wisdom, and love, of course. Goodbye.